This is Take Back Our Power with host Joy Binah. Information that supports community health. Information empowering you with personal health. Take back our power. And now, here's Joy.
Welcome to Take Back Our Power. I'm Joy Binah. Our guest today is Sara Nelson. Sara Nelson is the Executive Director of the Romero Institute, a law and policy center located in Santa Cruz. The Institute was founded in 1980 and is exposing and implementing solutions to structural injustice, human rights, constitutional violations, and serious threats to the environment. The Romero Institute is currently engaged in a 10-year initiative on global warming and climate change. Sara Nelson was the former executive director of the Christic Institute, an interfaith law and policy center in Washington, D.C. for almost 20 years. The Institute conducted a series of historic lawsuits and organizing projects throughout the country in the 80s and 90s. Sara was director of the State of the World Forum in San Francisco that produced annual conferences of Nobel laureates, global leaders in government, academia, science, business, youth to dialogue about the challenges and potential solutions facing humanity in these times. Sara is a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, and the proud mother of 2 young men. With 4 decades of experience as the executive director of some of our nation's most effective public interest research, public education, grassroots organizing, and law and policy organizations, Sara is bringing her experience and expertise and that of the Romero Institute to the challenge of global warming and climate change. This new 10-year initiative will begin by addressing the Tri-County area of Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties. Climate change is a growing issue today. Media announcements are coming every week about new studies showing that global warming effects are progressing more quickly than the scientists had predicted. Sara Nelson is with us today to discuss this issue at a timely moment, as this month is the anniversary of the release of the Laudato Si Climate Change encyclical by Pope Francis last year. Welcome, Sara. Such a deep pleasure and honor to have you today on Take Back Our Power. Such an honor.
Thank you.
So can we begin by having you explain exactly what the Laudato Si is?
Laudato Si was an encyclical that Pope Francis released last year in June. It was his encyclical on climate change. Now that's a very unusual thing because they don't release a lot of encyclicals. And when they do, it is understood that the 1.3 billion Catholics in the world will study it, understand it, that everyone will take it seriously. And something that's really unusual about this one is he didn't release the encyclical just for the Catholics. Mm-hmm. He released it for every person in the world. He made it very clear, I'm speaking to each person. And what he did a number of things in the encyclical. First of all, he made it very clear that climate change and global warming are being caused by humans. Because, there's been this debate going on, and he himself is a scientist. And so he made it clear, he outlined exactly why this was true, and said, listen, we're out of time, and we all have to participate now in turning this around for the sake of future generations, and because and he was it was an entire spiritual argument about how we are responsible for this beautiful, exquisite gift that has been given to us, this gorgeous planet that gives and gives and gives to us in terms of food, shelter, everything, and that we have not taken care of it, and now we all together have to change our behavior, open our minds, open our hearts, and realize that we have this responsibility to act and act immediately. So one of the things that's happening, of course, is that there's information being disseminated to the public saying that we're not responsible for climate change, that it's coming from the activities of the sun, or it's a cyclical thing that happens on the planet and now it's coming again. And this is just not true. Mm-hmm. Our organization has spent the last 3.5 months in very intense research because we're initiating a 10-year project on climate change, and our projects, we always very seriously try to gather the facts before we make the plan of what we're going to do, because we want to be standing on the truth when we do one of our projects and speaking truth. So it's very clear in the research, if you look at this material, that the carbon that is in the atmosphere, that is creating a blanket around the Earth, that is holding in warmth and increasing the warmth of the Earth, that carbon, if you just look at it scientifically, is from fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And it's the fossil fuels that we're burning and have been burning since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The difference is now that the graph is going like this in terms of the increased carbon emissions, methane emissions, all of which contribute to this more parts per million in the atmosphere that creates this blanket situation. There are other things happening with the sun and with the other planets, but NASA, I know there's one story out that NASA is saying that there's all these things going on with other planets in our solar system, mm-hmm. and it's just part of a sun cycle. Mm-hmm. If I went to the NASA site, and that's not what they're saying. There's all kinds of material on the NASA site about climate change, and it's very clear to everyone that we're causing this problem. Now, it reminds me of tobacco. Remember when the tobacco companies spent millions and millions of dollars hiring PR people to tell us for years and decades that there was no certainty that smoking cigarettes caused lung cancer? That was just, mm-hmm. You remember that whole thing? And then finally, the states started really investigating and suing because of all the medical costs that were weighing upon the states for all the people with lung cancer and emphysema and all these things that were coming from this. So now the same kind of thing is happening in climate change. The state of New York and the state of California have filed legal action with regard to Exxon, and they're investigating and subpoenaing and what have you, because it's clear now from documents that have been released that Exxon knew in the 70s that they were contributing to climate change, and they knew that this was serious, mm-hmm. but they hired people and scientists to do studies and PR people to put out the message that, this is, this isn't really happening, or the scientists aren't clear about it, and created a lot of confusion. And now you have a situation where the impacts of climate change are going to be so expensive, both for the federal government and the states and other countries, that often when the money starts to rub, then sometimes you'll get the kind of action that some of the citizens have wanted for a long time. So I think that the impact of the crises, mm-hmm. and the catastrophes, mm-hmm. and the hurricanes. Mm-hmm. And
yes, let's define what is the crisis. What is climate change?
Well, as I was saying before, the basic problem is that there's too much carbon dioxide going up into the air, and it stays there for hundreds of years. So you can't just fix it easily once it's up there. And it also it also goes into the ocean and then back up into the air. So since the Industrial Revolution, which was they count that from 1880 forward. One way to understand this is, since that time, our warming has gone up 1 C, which is Celsius, in that whole time. We are wedded to 0.5 C. It's in the oceans, it's in the air, it's already in play. So we're going to go up to 1.5, and the scientists are now saying...
In other words, it's inevitable that we're going to...
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
1.5 is inevitable, and the scientists think that it's inevitable that we're going to go to 2C. Now, this rapid increase is happening right now in this tiny little first part of the century. So you had a long time going to the 1 point. Now you're moving quickly to 1.5 and even more quickly to 2. Our goal, the goal of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, which I'm on the steering committee of that and meet every 2 weeks on Skype with people all over the world, the goal of GCCM and of the Romero Institute and many people who are involved in looking at this is to keep it at 1.5. So we know that in this century we're probably going to go to 2, but if we all work together, we'll bring it back to 1.5 before the end of the century. The reason why that's important is because as you go higher, the impacts of it become much more dramatic, and the pain and suffering and even death that increases as it increases. And they've never seen anything like this. There is no explanation for this increase in parts per million, in warming. Nothing explains this except human activity. When you compare it with all other records, yes, there was a time back about 7,000 to 11,000 years ago where there was an increase in carbon dioxide, which could have come, I haven't researched it, but it might have come from a lot of big tornadoes or volcanoes, because they release carbon. Carbon comes from fossil fuels that are in the ground, like coal, oil, natural gas, and this is carbon stored, and when you burn it, you release carbon dioxide. You burn it through cars, trucks, energy, big smokestacks, and we're using it for our energy, and we're using it for our transportation. These are the two big areas that are contributing to our problems. And we have led this, the United States, because we have been the biggest growing industrial nation in the world, and it's only been recently that China is now surpassing us. But we are the primary driver of this whole problem. We have this special responsibility, because the people who are suffering the most right now had nothing to do with making the problem. You know, there are people in Africa, there are people in India, there are people who did not cause this, and yet they are getting flooded, they're having droughts and they can't grow their food, and there's climate changes that are happening to them that are making it hard for them to survive. So another thing that the Pope said in his encyclical was, this is also a justice issue. It's not only a protect creation and all life systems issue, because we're losing species at about 100 a week now. So, and that will increase with this. But he also said this is a justice issue, because we have to realize that the most affluent countries in the world have caused it, and then the poorest people are suffering the most and will suffer the most because they don't have the resources to deal with it. And he also said it's an economic issue, because in Laudato Si, he said, we're going to have to look at some other economic models to figure out how to solve it. Because the shareholder model, which is our model and is one that's spreading all over the world, means you take the profits of actually the main goal of the corporation, according to our laws, is to create profit for the shareholders. It's not to worry about the environment or even about the community where your factory is or anything. It's just, in fact, you can be fired if you don't attend to the profit issue. The problem with that is that it can override any considerations for the environment, and so you can have a kind of raping and pillaging going on.
As we have.
As we have. And so what he was saying is, to solve it, we have to look at something else. So so that's one of the things that's going on, is trying to figure out what economic models would help us in this crisis situation.
Well, and as the question comes up, how imminent are these changes? You're already speaking to them happening.
They are happening, and they are happening.
Yes.
I mean, there are more tornadoes, bigger hurricanes. I mean, the 3 hurricanes that just happened in the Pacific, Fiji, the Philippines, and one other area, I think it might have been Vietnam, but there's 3 of them that are altogether the most huge catastrophes for their nations on record, the most expensive, the most devastating. And I mean, right now the Philippines are totally active on climate change because they've already experienced just the beginning of because we're in the beginning of this.
Right.
And
the fires in Canada from lack of rain.
Right. I mean, that was devastating what just happened. Just devastating. 60,000 people being evacuated. What they say about the Pacific events that are the biggest that have occurred is that they're like 5 Katrinas all at once when you have these kinds of storms. So we're looking at the beginning of flooding in areas where there's water, severe drought in areas where there's not so much water, and tornadoes, hurricanes, gigantic storms, etc. And we can assume, I mean, I've read some stories, you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but some scientific projections that the kind of storms that we're going to see if we start getting to 2C or above are beyond our imagination.
Yeah.
So really,
but 1.5 is we're going to be expecting, which is inevitable.
That's inevitable.
We're going to be expecting some really continued horrific storms.
We're going to be.
It's just not avoidable.
But it's when you start getting to 2,
yes,
or 2.5 and 3. That's when you have real inundation of water onto the coasts.
Yeah.
That's a very serious potential impact because you have 200 million people living on the coasts in the world. 60-some% of people live on the coast, and they will all be migrating. Then you're going to have, and Harvard has had for a long time a climate science course that talks about how serious it is to think about the migrations off the coasts that could come with the increase in sea, and the law and order problems, food, water, land, where do we live, kind of disruptions, hundreds of times greater than anything we're seeing, which is bad enough in the Middle East and Europe. And so there are very, very serious things, but actually there's a message of hope here.
Yes, that's the next question. How can we hope to divert this, what feels inevitable?
It is, I have to admit that when we first started studying this in January, I began to find, we've done a lot of big cases, a lot of big projects, and some of them are very serious, but I did feel this weight. Every time I would wake up, I just feel this weight of this, knowing of this. And what are we going to do about this? And then we discovered that in California, we actually have one of the best solutions, probably the best solution on the planet right now. So for a democracy, I mean, obviously, if you're a dictatorship, you could put in a solution right now without a lot of voting and Congress agreeing, which Congress has always been a problem in recent years. So, but we have, for a democracy, probably the best solution. And it just, now I wake up every day filled with hope.
Wonderful.
Because this law was passed in 2002, and it says that local communities can form their own private/public agencies, their own energy agencies, and what they can do with their agency is they can decide what kind of power they want to buy on the market. So instead of buying fossil fuels, they can buy renewables, and they can bring their emissions down really fast. So 4 places in California are now full on doing this: Marin, Sonoma, and Lancaster down south, and I think San Francisco will be rolling in June. That's what I've heard. So, and Marin and Sonoma have dramatically reduced their emissions, and there are 22 other areas in the state working on it, and we here our people have been working for 3 years on this, and we're now going into phase 2, and we should be producing and distributing through PG&E distributes it, the energy by the summer to fall of 2017. So we're about a year away of going step-by-step renewables. In our 3 counties, we're the biggest public-private agency in the state because we're doing 3 counties at once. That's Santa Cruz County, Monterey County, and San Benito. And one of the great things it's been a tremendous amount of work, and the staff person who is the primary staff person to Supervisor Bruce McPherson has really facilitated and coordinated this 3-year effort to do the feasibility studies, to figure out whether this is possible, to work on the proposed guidelines.
What type of renewable energy are we talking about?
Well, what we're talking about: solar, wind. 2 other renewables are the kind geothermal, and also the kind that when you take landfills, they're releasing gases. You can capture those gases and use them for fuel. You can use biofuel. So these are all in the renewable category. Over in the fossil fuel category, our guidelines in our 3 counties already proposed say no nuclear, which is not so much as fossil fuel, but it's so dangerous, as we know from Fukushima and other problems, other accidents. No nuclear, no coal, and no unbundled. Now, Marin did unbundled.
What does that mean?
We don't want to do that here. Unbundled is that you buy unbundled bunches of energy. And when you do that, and they're unbundled, they don't have the certificates with them, so you can't tell if it's dirty or clean energy. It's better to buy bundled energy, because with those, you know exactly the certificates of exactly what it is. So everybody's working out the kinks.
Sounds like the opposite of the mortgage crisis.
Yes. Yes. So anyway, we're learning from any mistakes that have been made by the others that are doing it. Everybody's learning from one another. Humboldt County is now moving along rapidly, and they have what we've heard, the best guidelines, but we haven't had a chance to look at them now. But the point is that these is an agency that will serve the public. It's not the shareholder model. So what that means is that when we pay our bill for our energy, a percentage, half of that will go to PG&E, and they will continue to maintain the grid, to distribute the energy and bill us. And half of it will go to our CCA, which is called Citizens Community Choice Aggregation of Power, or Community Choice Energy, sometimes it's called. And these CCAs are the ones that are growing around California. And so we can take our profits, and we will have some profits. We will have to pay back the money, the loan, to get started. And as we do that, we have more and more profits. We can invest those in wind farms and solar farms right in our area, in our 3 counties. So we can begin to produce our own energy. We can invest them in our cities on solar panels that will go over all of our parking lots. So you'll have shade for your car, you'll be pulling in power and putting it in the grid. Right now, with PG&E, if you have solar panels, they won't let you collect any more than what you need yourself, or not much more. if we have our CCA, we can open that up and say you can collect 3 times as much power as you use, and you can get credit for that as it goes into the grid. And so we can all become solar power producers and creators of energy. And so if you can imagine, if you have enough of that going on in 3 counties, 18 cities and 3 counties, you can bring your emissions down dramatically. And it's important because, as I said earlier, the United States has a special responsibility for creating this threat to all life systems on planet Earth. But also, I checked, and California is the 2nd biggest state emitter in the United States, surpassed only by Texas, which has almost twice as much as we do. But it matters to bring California down for the country and the world, because we have been the 2nd most emitter. And so if we all do it together, it's going to help our economy, create jobs, bring our profits back into our own economy. It's going to bring down our emissions and help us save the environment. And it's not going to cost more. I mean, even there might be a little time where it's a little teeny more. Like I think when Marin started, they offered 33% renewables. PG&E was offering 19% at that point. Of all the energy sources, 19 they said was renewable. Marin started with 33 and then went to 50, and is just pushing, trying to go as high as they possibly can towards 100% renewables. Now, some of that, the pricing depends on, it's getting better for us because the cost of renewables is going down. So we intend to be, and all these CCAs intend to be very competitive in terms of pricing. And because we don't have to pay shareholders, we are in a better position to be able to do that, because we can invest more in the renewables and not worry about whether or not our profit margin is going to be what the shareholders expect it to be for their investment. So it's a win-win-win for the cities and the counties and the people. And PG&E, it's not a total loss for them because they will continue to be paid to do the grid and distribution. Of course, you know, they have attorneys and shareholders that aren't happy about this, and there have been efforts to try to block things at the state level, but it failed. I mean, they wanted, for instance, when we have this new energy coming, we'll get a thing in the mail if we pay utilities, and it'll say, if you want to opt out of the CAA and go back to PG&E, check this box. And they wanted it to be the other way around. They wanted it to be, if you want to opt in, then check this box, because they thought a lot of people just wouldn't bother. But they lost that fight. So we're all in when it happens. The question is, you know, whether we stay in.
Well, how can the
financially, there's no reason not to.
Right.
It's all plus plus.
Right. And how can the individual help to support this?
Well, right now, the phase that's happening is very, very important phase that's going on now. The 350-page or so report that has been completed after 3 years of work by the planning committee of the Monterey Bay Community Power Agency is now in the hands of all the city councils, the 18 city councils, and the 3 county board of supervisors in our 3 counties. They have to study it and look at it. It is wonderful if they hear from citizens and leaders of their community that we want this. We're for this. Some people are for it for economic reasons. Some people are for it for environmental reasons. But it's a win-win-win any way you look at it. And so, but they need to hear from people, because the best thing would be for all 21 entities to join before the end of October of this year. Then we'd be the strongest. We'd get the best prices in buying energy. It's a better situation if you have more in the Monterey Bay Community Power apparatus and agency. So our hope is that all of the city councils and boards of supervisors will do it, but we don't know. You know.
So let's be really clear about what we're asking our viewers to do.
Yes.
So we're asking them to contact their city councils and their county board of supervisors and say what?
We're asking them to write a letter, to speak to them, privately or however, and tell them, I'm interested in my community, my church, my parish, my business, my school, my neighborhood. We're all interested in having the CCA and being part of it. So we want our town to join it, or we want our county to join it. That's done by the Board of Supervisors. The town is done by the City Council. We're watching it, we're learning about it, we're excited about it. We want renewable energies at a fair price, and we believe this is the answer. There's really nothing that we've seen that can bring the emissions down this fast, and also be a win-win economically. So it's just now, if people want to understand more about it, they can contact the Romero Institute at romeroinstitute.org and sign up, and we will make all kinds of information available to people, because we're gathering it ourselves, we're putting it together. There's this is from the global climate Catholic climate movement. This is an enormous work that they've done that's very, very good. We have materials from the Monterey Bay Community Power, and we also have our own materials that we've been developing that are shorter ones, that talk about problems and solutions. So we are working really hard to make sure that people have access to easily digestible material that can help them understand. It's a little complicated because it's all the science and all the economics.
And along those lines, if people want to learn more about the issue globally, this is an excellent book by Naomi Klein. This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. And you were just telling me that she was invited.
Yes.
Please.
This is a really amazing book. It has affected so many people's consciousness. If you just read the introduction to this book, she is brilliantly done. The way she walks a person through our natural resistance to this and takes us to the next step and then the next step. It's really very beautifully done. But she wrote this book, and when Pope Francis released the encyclical last June, which was like a ray of hope just sweeping around the world and activating all kinds of people, they then had a summit at the Vatican in Rome to strategize about, okay, what steps do we all have to take now? What are the next steps? And they invited Naomi Klein to come and strategize with them, which I thought was really terrific, because she's really good. She's a wonderful writer. She's very, very intelligent when she does her analysis of what's going on.
All right, so when we ask our audience and your friends and family to take action, this is our future. This is the future of our children. This is the future of our world.
It is.
There's nothing more important than this issue.
It is, and no, there's nothing that even comes close.
No.
And what I, one of the things that's being said, I think it might have been Paul Hawkins who first said it, I'm not sure, but he said the point that's being made is past generations have the excuse of ignorance. Future generations have the excuse of being totally overwhelmed by the cascading effect that's coming, unable to do anything but try to survive. We have no excuse. We're in this window where if we all work together and we all activate, and Pope Francis said there's not a single person on this planet who doesn't have something to contribute to this and doesn't have a role to play in literally saving our life systems and our home for our children and our grandchildren, that everyone has something that they can do. Our churches can become green. They can have solar panels all over them. Our schools can have solar panels all over them. Our parking garages. Our families can do these little audits, which will be available on the internet, so you can figure out what your carbon footprint is and how to bring it down. We can all be bringing it down together, and it's sort of like the World War II mobilization, where everyone was doing something. That's what's being called for right now. Is we all roll up our sleeves and get our little list and stick it on the fridge, and okay, we're going to do this, and then we'll take the next step, and just do it. And together we can turn this around.
So Sarah, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your lifetime of service to our human family and taking this on, you and the Romero Institute, and motivating us to finally really step into action, making this a priority. And this discussion needs to continue, so we will be having a part 2, and I invite you to tell our viewers a little bit about what is in store for part 2 of Take Back Our Power and global warming.
Well, our plan is that the part 2 would include a representative from the Monterey Bay Community Power Agency, and they can answer some questions and give some important information as we proceed towards the end of October, when we're hoping all the 21 entities will come in, the counties and the cities. Also, a person from the religious community, because the faith community, both the Catholic and interfaith community, are really moving now, and they want to have the solar power. They want to be able to generate solar power not only for power, but also to be able to take some of it and share it with the poor people in some of their constituencies that have the power turned off all the time because they can't afford. So they're thinking about it also as a sharing capacity under CCA. And I think it's really important that we have a young person talking about why they want all of us adults to take action now and work with them to save their future.
Wonderful. Well, I will certainly look forward to that. And I hope you'll join us. Thank you so much for being with us today on Take Back Our Power. And again, Sarah, thank you so much for all the work you have done your whole life.
Thank you.
Thank you.